Welcome to our regular audience and first-time watchers accordingly. Hi, I'm Rob Kosick, the host of Money Matters
with the Wealth Whisperer.
Besides our podcast, we also offer what I would consider an incredibly informative newsletter that we put out quarterly. Whenever I have a staff member write an article, I ask them to have the first couple of sentences be as formative as possible so our readers can make a quality snap decision as to whether it is worth their time to continue reading. On today's podcast topic, to say that almost every one of us will be impacted by managing our parents, spouses, or our own accommodations, care, and finances as one ages would be a massive understatement. Today's topic is on senior care. I intend to include in the discussion the different levels of care, where this care can be received, and how does one pay for the care. I'm very excited and to a certain extent relieved to have an industry expert with us. Our guest today is Deb Saul, Senior Consultant at Stephanie Coffey Sullivan Placement Consultants. It is so nice to see you and have you here, Deb.
It is great to be here, Rob.
Fantastic. So what I want to do is start by speaking a little bit about the beginning of the company. I know that the founder, Stephanie, and you have known each other for a long time. And people generally are going to start business for two reasons. One, they're knowledgeable in the space. And two, they're passionate about the real value that they could bring to society. First, I'd like to know from what you remember back in the day, why did Stephanie start the firm with your help? What was it about the passion that was created that led her to say, this is something that we should be doing?
Well, I'm going to go back a little bit, Rob. She actually started as a candy striper in the hospitals. And so their passion grew just for helping people in the hospitals.
Okay.
She went on to get her master's degree in social work and ended up in the hospital systems and realized that as she was trying to help coordinate care for folks, that it is very much a maze out there. And it's really hard to navigate the system. So she decided she wanted to, how can she continue that and really help people navigate that maze? I came along, I met her, actually I was working in senior living at the time.
Okay. I guess now we know why you're here.
That's right. And I actually have been in the industry for probably the past 25 plus years.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah. And she and I worked together a lot on getting, having folks come to our communities.
Okay.
And so then she kept saying, come on over, Deb.
Okay.
And I finally joined her team.
Okay.
And, the rest is history.
All right. Well, we're going to talk more about the company later, but now we just want to provide the opportunity to our listeners and our watchers to learn. Okay. So I have so many things that I want to talk to you about. Let's start with, what are the most common mistakes you see being made when one's making care option decisions?
So one real problem is a lot of times in our society today is we're going to Mr. Google, right? Mm-hmm. And Google gives you a plethora of things, thousands and thousands of things, and just things pop up that really are not necessarily relevant to you. Mm-hmm. Also, sometimes people go to their friends. Well, they might say, my mom went here, did this. All the time, right?
All the time, sitting with clients, and that's what they tell me they've learned about these types of things. And
your mom and my mom might be completely different,
yeah.
Right? So that's kind of a common mistake. So again, family, friends, even medical professionals can sometimes steer you wrong because they're not necessarily in the communities, mm-hmm. or they have an urgent discharge and they just want to get you out. Mm-hmm. And so, then the person's in crisis, but yet the person's not really ready to go home yet. So there's a lot of things like that. Another common mistake is, lack of planning. One statistic is like, if you ask a room, like even all of you out there, how many of you want to go to senior living?
Yeah.
most people don't raise their hand, right?
No, they don't.
So maybe 4% of people will actually plan and do that. But the bottom line, the sad truth is that about 70% of people need senior living post age 65 for one reason or the other. So just lack of planning. And then we also see lack of planning financially, physically, just a lot of different things. So those are kind of some of the common mistakes and loopholes that we see.
Yeah, I guess the mistake may not even be the right word. Is, it's tough to sit there and think about what is life going to look like and how do we make decisions accordingly? One, you're not experiencing it now, so it may or may not take place. But two, to put yourself in that position of being incapable of doing those things. It's a really hard topic to take on. So, you could use the word procrastination. But that's what I see is I would see, as you're sort of noting, probably over 90% of the time are people putting their minds to these types of decisions, not until they're thrust and in need of making that decision.
Right.
And that can be overwhelming. So to a certain extent, I'd say that the biggest mistake that I'm hearing from you would be that a lot of people are just trying to take this task on completely themselves.
Right.
That to say that'd be overwhelming would be an understatement. Okay.
Right.
Well, let's talk about the emotions, since you're dealing with people.
Yeah.
And nothing is more sensitive, than family members and care of their parents. What is some things that people go through when it's, hey, can we or do we want to have mom or dad living with us?
Well, and there's a lot of factors even in thinking about that, because is your home handicapped accessible?
Yeah.
Do you have as many steps as they do? Thinking about that. How can they get in their bathroom? And all of those kind of things. And then also, you might be retired and you think it's no big deal. But, if, say, someone has dementia and they have some behaviors of just being up in the middle of the night and pacing, and you're concerned they're going to go out the door, for example, then what do you do? So are you even equipped to take care of them on your own with your at home? So sometimes you can try it. And that might be an option, but a lot of times it kind of goes down the rabbit hole.
How are the parents themselves? I just have a fun question to ask is, if they were given the option to live in assisted living with other people in similar situations than them, or living with their kids, what has your experience been? That more of them would rather be in assisted living, or more would rather, I would guess that more rather prefer to be in assisted living, but I could be wrong.
It actually gives you more independence. So it's the bottom line is, and sometimes you don't realize that, there's some families that they feel like they should take care of families.
Yes.
And so that's where they are. And that's where, our industry, it's so diverse because you have people that are all different, thought processes and everything. Others that, again, they try it, but for the most part, you just have to look at what's reasonable. What was the question? I'm sorry.
No, you absolutely answered in terms of the mental process of a family working through it, because you're not only going to have differences in thought, but differences in opinions.
Right.
And you're going to have levels of selfishness as it pertains to some of the kids that you say, well, no, I'm not in a position to help take care of mom or dad. And I'm sure that unfortunately, you see it being thrust on the most caring of
right. Well, but also think about this. I'm a mother of 2 sons. Mm-hmm. Do I want them helping me in the bathroom? No, not really. So you kind of have to even think about that. Or, can a daughter give her mom a shower, but can she give her dad a shower?
Yeah. So
even those kind of thoughts that kind of come to mind. Yeah. And then sometimes, it could be a temporary fix, but then what?
So I want to turn it over to, where the parents, as you've experienced it, I've seen now that I'm at the age of my parents, my wife's parents, is their opinions get even stronger because they're the parent.
Right.
They're always been leaned on for what's the right thing to do.
Right.
It's your experience, what do you do about when the parent is being overly strong and opinionated as it pertains to living alone, and they really should just not be living alone? Where the kids have to lay down the law and say,
right.
I am sorry, I am sorry. How do families handle those types of, what has been your experience with sitting with the group and watching, maybe you're sitting and the person that needs to be cared for, it's obvious they no longer can care for themselves, but they still think that they can care for themselves
in their mind. In their mind.
How do families handle that dynamic? How do you help them handle that dynamic?
So that's when we call the senior whisperer. But part of it is, it's about, and one thing we work to try to be, but even the families can do this themselves too, is being respectful of what the person wants. So for example, like we sometimes have a daughter or a family member, they tell us, oh, my parents like X, Y, and Z. And then we might do a home visit. And I say, let me talk to your actual parents, especially if they're relatively independent, and find out what they want.
I was going to talk about the next topic being, okay, how do you pay for this care? But since all this is free, right? All care, no matter what you choose, whether it's...
Sure it is, Rob.
Whether it's nursing home or assisted living, it's all free, right?
No.
Okay. All right, so it's not. So, all right. So our follow-up needs to be the costs of said levels of care.
Right.
Some of our watchers will have the resources. Others may require some level of financial aid to be able to hit some of these nuts.
Right.
Obviously those that are taking their time today to be watching more than likely knows that this is not inexpensive.
Correct.
And to sort of try to wade through not only what the costs of the different levels of care are, or what potential support is available from public funding, is something I want to speak to. All right. So I got a number of states, I'd say 30-40% of our clients at DLAC Wealth Advisors, probably 40%, do not live in Ohio where this podcast is taking place today. My parents were cared for, and went to assisted living and nursing home, in the state of New York. So I've got to learn a little bit about the dynamics and the differences of Ohio, Kentucky, New York, Florida.
Happy to discuss that.
How are the cost differences dictated by state? Is it, so you have the state and then you have the different facilities. Is the level of public support that is out there, is it solely at a national level, or are there state sponsored fundings that exist?
So in the United States, there's a National Council of Aging. And but also think about like the cost of different places. It's very similar to real estate, right? So housing market in Cincinnati is different than the housing market in New York, in Florida, etc. And even Florida is like going up crazy because of insurance, so senior living is very similar to that. So like even in Ohio, you can probably in New York add a couple of thousand to the prices that are in Cincinnati. Florida, can maybe be 1,000 extra, kind of thing. But did you want me to kind of give just some general cost options?
Yeah, sure. Why don't we, if you want to give an example, like in Ohio, a top of the line nursing home would cost what?
The nursing home range really is probably $9,000 at a low end. That's a semi-private room, up to $25,000 a month. A month.
Wow. And that's, as you would know, a lot more expensive than it used to be.
Right. So it is very, very expensive because, again, you're paying for 24/7 nursing. And then that's the $1 million question. Even though in assisted living, they actually, I don't know if we touched on that, they have 24/7 nursing too, for the most part. So, there is a disparity like with assisted living and a nursing home.
All right. Now that we're going down the cost route, I'm sure everyone's ears are perking up. Okay. How could they not? For those who may be eligible for Medicaid, What defines eligibility, and what does the approval process look like?
So typically, the Medicaid, I think you have to have less than 2,000 in assets.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that is not 100% true, because here's an example. Say you have a husband and wife gets dementia, and she's, like we described earlier, is now starting to wander in the middle of the night. Okay. And the husband loves her, till death do us part, whatever.
Yeah.
But he still wants to live in his own home, and he still wants to, care for his wife, but it's to the point where she now locked me out of the house and I can't get back in, or something. And that's actually a true story.
We have to find her safe.
Has happened. Yeah. Right. But we also want to protect money and protect assets, etc. So what we recommend at that point is, again, everything has an expert. So we suggest you see an elder law attorney for that. And that attorney can help you, quote unquote, split your assets so that that she can, like, live somewhere and, quote unquote, spend down to Medicaid to, like, get to that $2,000 asset. So again, recommendation is to see a senior elder law attorney, and but also know, and I think we're going to talk about this, but that Medicaid can limit your options. So if you do have money, you can also choose to pay a price, if you want to, if you want to dip into your funds. But if we find a place, and there are places where you can, like a 2-year private pay or something like that, and then it will spill over to what's in Ohio, we call it the Ohio Assisted Living Waiver.
Okay.
And New York also has that. Florida has it. But Florida has a wait list to get on the assisted living waiver.
Okay.
So sometimes people, and I've had this happen and helped families transition, but they'll be moving from Florida because they know the Medicaid is coming. These are the planner people. They know Medicaid is coming. And so they move them to Ohio because there's no actual wait list to get the waiver in Ohio. I mean, it still is a long process, but they can get that.
What makes one eligible for the Ohio sponsored Medicaid for assisted living that you're speaking to? Waiver. Okay.
I think, and again, I'm not an expert in this. That's why we do the attorneys, but it's the same qualifications for Medicaid insurance. So again, that spend down of the $2,000, whatever, and then and assets and everything else. It's the same criteria, but the difference between, like, Medicaid insurance and the waiver is, the waiver's goal is to help you live in the least restrictive environment for as long as possible.
Comes into play.
Correct.
Because a lot of times for Medicaid, assisted living is not in play. That Medicaid is there for people that need full care,
right,
at a long-term care facility, nursing home.
Right.
Okay.
But sometimes it's just, my mom's not eating, she's not taking her meds right, she's not, so she has no skill. So we talked about skills being the feeding tube and the trach and that. But sometimes, say somebody like that, they still need help. They really don't need a nursing home. Do you really want that lady or man sitting in a bed?
Yeah.
No. So there are options where people, communities have opted to take Medicaid, assisted living waiver, quote unquote, out of the gate. But a lot is dependent upon availability. And then there's this whole thing of pending. So my understanding, when somebody is pending Medicaid, it's like the facility is willing to foot the bill until Medicaid does the reimbursement, so there's a lot of different nuances.
As many may know, and many will not know, that there are ways to plan to have yourself maybe look more destitute than you really are, to become better prepared and eligible, for public supports. And so on the national Medicaid, there's a 5-year look back. So if you have assets in your name and you are to give it away, whether it be through gifting or whether it be placing it in what is known as an irrevocable trust, they can go back and say, okay, I need bank statements and invest everything that you've had for the past 5 years, and they find it, it starts a clock from the time that. So if you gave money away 5 years ago and you go to a facility 3 years later, then 60% of that would not be deemed. So this is something you would have to get involved in because it's so much part of the decision process. Is what does the eligibility process look like for Medicaid? How much time goes and resources does it go into filling out an application, and how much time do you have to wait before you find out the outcome?
What I've seen, and usually like if you're in a community, and I don't know if you had this experience in New York, but a lot of times the communities will walk you through the process too, because number one, they have to be approved to be an assisted living sponsor. And those assisted living waivers, those are all state sponsored. So, in Ohio, typically around 3 months, and that's where it's like Florida could have, I don't know what the current rate is.
How about the federal Medicaid?
Federal Medicaid, probably the same, 3 to 6 months.
3 to 6 months, yeah.
But my understanding is that it's still going to be retroactive from application date, is what I understand. And so that's why you might be waiting on it, but they would still, I think, go back to application.
Okay. All right. This is something that many of people, I'm sure, think about. And that is the limitations of the federal Medicaid and where I could then stay. So I'm sure this is something that you stay very active in. And because I think the organization that you consult with is in essence a placement firm to a certain extent. So Ohio, Kentucky, from all the different places that you've helped people within, what are the limitations? What percentage of places do take Medicaid? What's the level of support that comes from those that, what's from one of the things that I think everybody has dealt with that has parents or loved ones in facilities is the staffing. There's sometimes significantly lower staffing in certain facilities than there are at others. So compare and contrast Medicaid facilities that accept Medicaid and facilities that don't accept Medicaid. And are there some facilities that have just a few Medicaid beds and, other limitations to the number of Medicaid people that they'll have in? I'd like to have an open discussion about that whole topic.
So even I worked at a community, it was a national community, and we kind of allowed 2 Medicaid beds. Every single apartment was licensed for Medicaid, but only allowed 2 because, again, they're in a business to what? Make money. So they would allow 2. However, I've also worked for communities that usually still have a little heart. So even in my time there, we might have 3. Then we would have 4. So they have sometimes, or somebody does, we even had a person. So here's a whole nother dynamic. Memory cares often don't accept the assisted living waiver. So that becomes another dynamic. So one of the communities I worked in, it was like, it didn't accept it. And you tell people that up front, but the lady had lived there like 10 or 12 years, so then pretty much ran out of funds. And so our community did, again, this is where negotiation, there you go. And our community actually did not say you have to leave, which I was really, happy about. And so, again, things are not always black and white. There is gray in the industry. And sometimes it's just asking, the question, or, hey, my money is starting to run low. Most communities also have rate increases annually. And so if your money is kind of tight and finite, you can also say, hey, when that rate, you've got to get 30 days notice minimum, usually per their contract. But you can say, hey, we're really trying to stretch our dollar. Can you not do this rate increase? So I always say, in life, it never hurts to ask. So sometimes too, just, knowing that you can negotiate. One thing also we didn't talk about as another funding source is there's a veterans benefit. And so, how do you find additional money to help pay for this? We found that the federal government doesn't have billboards that say, hey, we can give you money for assisted living. there isn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that's another thing that some veterans are missing out on. There are income caps, like I think currently, and it changes every year, is like if you have over 160,000 in liquid assets,
Okay.
You don't qualify. But otherwise, that has, like, is your father a veteran? They can get like $1,800 a month. A widow can get like, I think it's $1,200. Widow of a veteran can get money.
Okay.
So
I've definitely heard of those. Yeah.
So that's another thing that we always look at and always ask.
Okay.
And then even like two veterans, I think it's like $3,200 a month towards assisted living.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you tap into that? And we again try to guide or give resources to people to help with that as well. Because that's a whole nother, if it can save you, $1,800 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's situations too where the person has too much money, but it's like educating you all that if your assets like go below that 160,
you're now eligible.
You are now eligible. And then that's going to help stretch your dollar longer as well, where, you might not need Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
You are also more, attractive to a place if you have money that lasts longer. So the game might be you have to have money for 2 years, but if you really have it for 5, because again, remember my community that I had only had 2 allocated beds.
Okay.
So if you've got 3 years, number one, that gives you a little cushion. And if you got 5 years, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to have a Medicaid slot.
Okay. So what does it look like for the person who doesn't have the money from day one? Okay. So their kids don't have the money. They don't have the money. There's no way they're going to be able to do self-pay. And all of a sudden they are physically eligible for, nursing care, but they financially can't afford nursing care. Right. Do they have any choice on where they're going to go? Or does the state decide what Medicaid facility?
No.
Okay.
I mean, you're still choosing.
Okay.
Sometimes, like if
so your firm then, since you're a placement firm,
right,
to help them say, okay, here are all the Medicaid eligible. Here's all the ones that either have beds, or we believe if you go on the waiting list, within a reasonable amount of time,
you'll be okay.
You'll be okay.
Right.
And then you are then helping them determine what's the best one for them.
Correct.
Okay.
But again, with the Medicaid, it again goes down.
Fewer and far, but
right.
Then your options are
right. Your options. I call it a funnel. So you have hundreds of options in the city of Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Different cities have different, but hundreds of options. We take a funnel, and the funnel, we number one, we try to do that based upon your care needs and cost
mm-hmm.
and budget and location, but for that particular person, again, the odds are limited. We can also, we can make calls. So say, let's go back to the lady that has no family. Okay. Yeah. So sometimes we can do that. We can make the calls and we can try to say, hey, here's 2 options for you. They're accepting Medicaid pending, etc. The Council on Aging here also in Hamilton, Butler, it's Butler County and Warren, it's like ESB, okay. But they also can help. They have care managers, but again, there's funding cuts, and that could take a while, but you can also, even in your home, have Council on Aging, and they will also do some sliding scale, things like they can help provide an aid.
Okay.
We didn't even really talk about, the in-home care average cost is probably about $35 to $40 an hour nowadays.
Okay.
But Council on Aging can assess you, see if you do need help with like meals, dressing, mm-hmm. things like that in your home, and then sometimes can do sliding scale. They can even do, I've fallen and I can't get up.
I've fallen and I can't get up.
Right? They can possibly sliding scale that button for you, mm-hmm. based upon your actual income. But again, typically the other thing, you have what's called a CCRC. So you have a continuing care retirement community. Most of those nonprofits are that. And so they might have independent living, which we didn't really even talk about, but independent living is another option where you get your meals, like say you're totally independent, sometimes can be cheaper, not usually in the big nonprofits, mm-hmm. but sometimes can be cheaper, but you get your meals and, an apartment and some oversight, but no clinical oversight. There's mm-hmm. none. But a CCRC has like independent living, assisted living, memory care, and then typically a nursing home attached.
Are these one of these communities where often people are buying in?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, we've had a lot of clients interested in looking into I'm sort of at that age now that maybe I no longer want to take care of the home. I don't have the resources outside to help as much. So maybe I should go somewhere where I can, I'm there. I'm going to be there the rest of my life, and they'll just move me up the care chain as it's required.
Right. And I come from a CCRC background,
okay.
And we really thought, oh, this is the wave of the future. This is it. This is the cat's meow, right?
Maybe I'm wrong.
But then these assisted livings, probably 25 to 30 years ago, popped up.
Okay.
And the assisted livings, we were like, oh, we CCRC people, they'll never last. Guess what? They're on every street corner now.
Yes, they are.
They're on every street corner. And so again, with every street corner and why they're successful is in that CCRC, you still have to what? Move. Independent, assisted, memory care, skilled nursing, right? In assisted living, you can stay in the same apartment. You can age in place. And again, dependent upon what that company's policy says, you can be there for the rest of your life if you want.
Okay.
So there's advantage also to these
especially
for-profits.
To Ohio, is what you're saying, because they can do more to assist.
Yes.
Where they may not be able to in Kentucky and New York, the two examples that we just mentioned.
Correct. The other thing is typically your big nonprofit CCRCs, they by their policy might not do a 2-person assisted living. So then what are they going to do with you?
Ooh.
You're going to be put in their skilled nursing facility.
Ooh.
So their policies are not, their policies in assisted living are, like they don't do some of the levels of cares that Ohio allows.
Okay. Your company's business. So we haven't talked specifically about what it is that your firm does and how is it that your firm gets paid. So the people that are listening out there and saying, okay, if I'm thrust into said situation, I want to be prepared accordingly, but I don't know whether I'm going to be able to cross every T and dot every I. Once that time comes, I'm certainly going to need help from an expert. What does your business do for people? Tell us a little about your organization, what they do.
So what we do is if you call us, we're going to do kind of an initial assessment by phone, but we really want to listen to you, your specific situation. We were talking earlier about procrastinators, planners, and then there's those in crisis. So it doesn't matter where you are in that spectrum, we will help you. So again, kind of doing that. And if you're in crisis, we got to help you. Mostly it's all by phone. Mm-hmm. But again, listening to needs, we look at care needs, budget, and location. But the other thing too, especially if you're a planner, we're going to look at what you desire. Do you want a balcony, as we discussed before? Mm-hmm. So we're looking at that. And then do we need to talk to your parent? And, like if a kid calls us,
okay.
So really kind of doing all of that. So, what we can do is help you, quote unquote, navigate the maze. We've talked about that. And so wherever you are, and that's the other thing is every situation is different. So when you Google it or you ask your friend, it doesn't necessarily, apply to your case. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we can really just, again, taking the hundreds of places.
And you're going to know the costs of all these places
Correct.
too, because cost obviously is going to play a very major role.
Correct.
In has the decision process.
Correct.
Okay. And
then,
how much does this cost the person who calls you?
So what we do, and it's kind of industry standard, is the communities actually pay us. Okay. So our services are free, whether, you're planning for 5 years from now or you need instant placement. So the kind that we get paid by communities. One thing that makes us a little bit different is, again, our number one goal is to find you and your loved one a place that they love, that don't ever want to move out. So there have been companies in the past that have tried to do it like for money, but typically they're all out of business now.
All right. We've talked so much. We've talked the different levels of care, the different, states of which may have certain levels of sponsored support. We've talked the funding thereof. Is there anything we haven't spoken about that is experiences you have or things that you came to today's discussion and I haven't given you the opportunity to speak to?
I don't think so. It is really helpful. Just like you are a financial expert, we are the senior living expert, and even can be called the senior whisperer sometimes. I should start my own podcast. Sorry, did I say that?
We'll let you. This will give you your first podcast.
Thank you. But it is, and every case is different, and we dig deep into every single case, and that's kind of what our expertise. And we also work from our hearts, and we always want our customers to be happy and find the right situation.
Well, from our hearts, both Deb and I will say that we hope that this was useful, educational, and this is a very deeply personal process and decision process that a family has to go through. So if we provided a little bit of help, fantastic. If you need or wish to get a hold of Deb or the group that she works with, you'll see their contact information. Please absolutely feel comfortable to reach out to them or us. As always, have a great one. Thank you.